I grew up believing that love came with conditions. In Worcester, my small town in rural Ohio, everything seemed so perfect at first glance. The old houses, with their Victorian facades covered in snow, shone under the yellowed light of the street lamps. The bare trees swayed gently in the biting wind, while families smiled and greeted each other on streets decorated with garlands and red bows. To the outside world, Worcester was a Christmas postcard, cozy, welcoming, family-oriented. But inside our home, the story was different. Far from that welcoming facade, my childhood was shaped by piercing silences, disapproving glances, and a constant sense of inadequacy. My name is Myrtle Davy. I'm 40 years old, with a husband who loves me so genuinely that sometimes, even now, I find myself doubting that it's real. I also have 2 wonderful children, Emma, with her watchful eyes and huge heart, and Benji, with his contagious laughter and sweet soul. They are my life, my whole world. And I have parents who never truly accepted me. To them, I was always a silent shame, a piece out of the perfect mold they were trying to build. Nothing I did was enough. No achievement ever seemed bright enough to light up the pride in their eyes. My brother Daniel was the exception, the golden child, the shining example that loomed over my head like an eternal shadow. I remember, as if it were happening right now, the first time I realized, without a doubt, that I was not loved the same way. It was Christmas Eve, and my parents' kitchen was filled with warm aromas: nutmeg, cinnamon, the freshly roasted turkey. The pots clattered, the dishes gleamed under the light of the china cabinet, and laughter echoed through the hallway. I was helping to cut fruits for the salad when I heard my mother's voice, clear as a bell in the silence between songs. She was talking to my Aunt Vivian softly, but not softly enough for me to not hear. "Daniel's lucky to have such well-mannered kids. Yours." She let the sentence hang in the air like poison scattered in the wind, and then let out a dry chuckle, as if it were a harmless joke. My hands froze on the cutting board. I slowly turned my head, and over my shoulder I saw Emma and Benji sitting on the living room rug, putting together Lego pieces. They stopped. They looked up at me, Emma's gaze broken like shattered glass. Benji bit his lip, looking down at the floor. A physical pain shot through my chest, so strong that for a moment I thought I might faint right there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to them, hug them, protect every bit of their innocence from that cold cruelty. But instead, I did what I always did. I smiled. I continued cutting the fruits as if I hadn't heard it, as if that hadn't destroyed me. Because that's what was expected of me. To swallow my tears, pretend everything was fine, thank the crumbs of acceptance that sometimes fell from the table. As I stirred the bowl, I felt my fingers tremble. My father entered the kitchen at that moment, and without noticing the tension in the air, asked, "Everything set for dinner, Myrtle?" I looked at him, and all I saw was indifference. Nothing I felt seemed to matter. Every family gathering was like this. A minefield of sharp words, forced smiles, and cruel comparisons. Daniel arrived carrying impeccably wrapped presents, his perfect children holding hands, and the atmosphere shifted, as if a golden aura surrounded him. My father laughed loudly at Daniel's jokes. My mother served him the best piece of the roast, and I existed in the shadow. "You're so sensitive, Myrtle," my mother would say every time I shyly tried to express my pain. "If you stopped taking everything so personally, if you were lighter, maybe things would be different." It was as if I was the one to blame for the pain I felt, as if being hurt was somehow my fault. That was the game they played, the game of flipping everything around until I started doubting my own reality. How many times did I question if I was overreacting? How many times did I wonder if I was truly ungrateful, difficult, wrong? Josh, my safe harbor, saw everything from the outside and tried to warn me. "You're not the problem, Myrtle," he'd say, hugging me as I silently cried in the bedroom after family dinners. "They use your kindness against you." But the child inside me, the one who desperately longed for their approval, still tried to be more polite, tried to please, tried to fit in. Even when the glances cut, even when the poisonous comments were thrown in silent dinners. Emma, always so perceptive, once whispered while I was putting her to bed, Mommy, why does Grandpa and Grandma like Uncle Daniel more than you? I choked on my response. I just hugged her and whispered, sometimes people have difficulty showing love, dear, but the important thing is that I love you with all my heart. But as I held her, I felt the tears wet my eyes. Love should be unconditional, not conditioned on perfection, performance, or submission. I knew that now. But even with all that awareness, with all that lingering pain, I still clung to a vain hope. That maybe one day things would change. That maybe one day my mother would look at me with pride. That my father would hug me for real, without that cold distance. But that Christmas, something would happen. Something that would change everything forever. Something that would destroy even that last silent hope I carried in my chest. And in that moment, I would finally see that it wasn't me who needed to change. It was my idea of love that needed to be freed. But I never imagined their cruelty would go so far as to expel me at the most sacred moment of the year. It was a week before Christmas when my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, sliding almost imperceptibly across the marble. The sharp sound of the notification broke the silence in the house, where only the crackling of the fireplace filled the air. I picked up the phone slowly, still with my hands cold from the dishes I had just finished washing. It was a message. From my mother. A simple sequence of words, as cold as the wind outside. Myrtle, we think it's best if you, your husband, and your children don't come this year. We don't want tension at Christmas. I stood there, frozen, the phone vibrating slightly between my fingers. I read the message once, then again, and once more. Each reading felt like a slap in the face. Tension? We were the tension? I felt my stomach churn, a bitter taste rising in my throat. Josh entered the kitchen at that moment, smiling, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate, a tradition of ours on cold December nights. But when he saw me, his smile faded. He quickly set the mugs on the table and walked over to me. "What's wrong, love?" he asked, his voice soft, cautious. Without saying anything, I just handed him the phone. I watched as his eyes scanned the screen, his jaw slowly clenching, as if holding back words he wanted to shout. He looked at me, indignant. "They're blaming you for something that doesn't even exist, Myrtle," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "This is pure gaslighting. Classic them." I swallowed hard, because I knew. I always knew. For years, they made me question my own memory, my feelings, even my sanity. They taught me to doubt my pain, to apologize for feeling, to mold myself to their narrative. "You're too emotional. You're exaggerating, as always. Stop being ungrateful." Phrases that echoed in my mind like a dark refrain. And now they were saying that I, Josh, and our children, 2 kids who just wanted love and acceptance, were the source of the tension. I sat heavily at the table, running my hands over my face. Josh knelt in front of me, holding my cold hands in his. "We can't keep letting them hurt you like this," he said, his eyes shining with both sadness and restrained anger. "We can't let them hurt our kids." I shook my head slowly, the tears threatening to fall. But even in the middle of that sadness, there was something new growing inside me. Something I hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of courage, like a thread of light breaking through the darkness. "Maybe it's for the best," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Maybe this year, maybe we need peace." Josh squeezed my hands, encouraging me. It was then that my phone vibrated again. It was my brother, Daniel. As if he had sensed the moment, he never failed to appear when the wound was open. "You're just being dramatic," his message read. "Grow up, Myrtle. If you were less sensitive, everything would be different." I almost laughed. Less sensitive. It was always that. As if being humiliated in front of my children, being ignored, being put down, was just a matter of perspective. If I simply stopped feeling, maybe, just maybe, I'd be worthy of their love. The problem was me, not them. That was the script written years ago. And for so long, I had faithfully played my part. But now I saw the play with different eyes. "You know what I realized, Josh?" I said, my voice steady for the first time in a long while. "What?" "They never wanted me to be strong. They always wanted me to shrink, to fit into their expectations. They wanted me to accept being less so I wouldn't cause trouble." Josh smiled sadly. "And you were never less, Myrtle. Never." I stood up, pulling him into a hug. And there, in the warmth of the fireplace, surrounded by the soft light of our Christmas tree decorated by Emma and Benji's little hands, I made a decision. A quiet but powerful decision. This would be the first time in 40 years that I would choose myself. I would choose my real family. I would choose real love without conditions. As I stroked Josh's hair, a strange calm spread through my chest. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't end that easily. I knew my parents and Daniel wouldn't accept my absence in silence. I knew they wouldn't miss the opportunity to drag me back into the role I had always played, the ungrateful daughter, the villain of the story. And they were just getting started. But the worst was yet to come. The emotional storm they would unleash to try to pull me back. On Christmas Eve, as the sweet aroma of freshly baked cookies filled our home, blending with the warm scent of wood burning in the fireplace, I thought, for a brief moment, that I might find peace. Emma and Benji were in the living room, wearing matching pajamas, building a block tower almost as tall as they were. Josh, focused, was tying golden ribbons around small packages under the tree. And I took a deep breath, trying to push away the shadows that kept lurking in my mind. But peace, I should have known, was never allowed for long. The shrill sound of my phone cut through the air like a shard of glass. I looked at the screen. Daniel. I felt my body stiffen as though I had plunged into icy water. For a second, I hesitated. I thought about letting it ring until it went to voicemail. But a part of me, maybe the old Myrtle still wanting to prove she was good enough, slid my finger across the screen, answering. "Hello?" My voice came out low, almost a whisper. Daniel's voice came through the other end, laced with a contempt he didn't even try to hide anymore. "You know you're destroying our family, right, Myrtle?" For a moment, I stayed silent, as if his words had to break through layers of disbelief before they could reach me. Finally, I found my voice, though still trembling. I am?" Daniel let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Yeah, Mom's devastated. Dad can't even sleep properly, and it's your fault. You turned Christmas into a nightmare for all of us." I bit my lip until I tasted the metallic tang of blood. There it was again, the old script, written and rehearsed over decades. I was the cause of their pain. I was the flaw. The stone in the shoe of their perfect family. Before I could respond, Daniel continued, merciless. "If you had an ounce of maturity, you would have come. You would have left the drama behind." I closed my eyes, fighting against the avalanche of guilt that threatened to bury me. With a thread of a voice, I could only manage to say, "Merry Christmas, Daniel." And I hung up. My hands shook so much the phone almost slipped from my grasp. I placed it on the counter as if it were something contaminated. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the pain that throbbed in my chest. But they weren't satisfied. The messages began to come in, one after the other, like poisoned arrows. "You'll regret spending Christmas alone." "Your kids deserve a real family." "When your kids grow up, they'll blame you for keeping them away from their grandparents." Each notification felt like an invisible stab. My eyes filled with hot tears. I let myself slide to the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinets, and I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried in a long time. I cried like that little girl who, one day, knelt in the dark hallway of my parents' house, hearing them say I'd never be good enough. Because deep down, that little girl still existed inside me, screaming, desperate for acceptance, for love, for a look of pride that never came. The tears ran silently as the smell of burning cookies began to fill the air. But I didn't have the strength to move. Then from the living room I heard something. Laughter. Clear crystal laughter. Emma and Benji were laughing, such pure, free laughter. It cut through my pain like a ray of light piercing through dark clouds. I lifted my tear-streaked face and listened. "Look, Benji, our castle is taller than Daddy," Emma exclaimed, giggling. "It's gonna fall! It's gonna fall!" Benji yelled, laughing so hard he could barely speak. And Josh, trying to save the crumbling tower, laughed along. There, in that room, was my true family. A family built with unconditional love. No shouting, no emotional blackmail, no need to earn the right to be loved. I felt something shift inside me. Something broke, not in pain, but in liberation. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of invisible chains fall from my shoulders. "Your kids deserve a real family," the messages had said. And they had one. We were that family. It was my responsibility to protect them, not just from what was physical, but from what was invisible and corrosive. I wiped my tears with the sleeve of my sweater, took a deep breath, and walked into the living room. Emma saw me first. "Mom, come see the magic castle." I smiled, the truest smile I'd given in weeks, maybe months. Josh stood up and, without a word, opened his arms to me. I ran to him, letting myself be enveloped in the safe warmth of his embrace. There, surrounded by their love, I realized I no longer needed that acceptance that had been denied to me for 40 years. I was enough. I always had been. I looked at my children, at Josh's smile, at the fireplace lighting our faces, and I knew with the deepest certainty that I would never again allow that old pain to dominate my life. I would build a new legacy for my family, free from the chains of guilt, free from the lies disguised as love. But even with all my strength, I wasn't prepared for the final blow they would try to deliver. December 26th dawned with a gray, heavy sky, as if even the weather in Worcester could sense what was about to happen. I was in the kitchen, still in my pajamas, holding a cup of coffee that was slowly cooling in my hands. The kids were playing in the living room, the soft sounds of laughter and toy thuds filling the air. Josh was reading the newspaper, his glasses sliding down his nose, distracted, comfortable. It was an ordinary morning. Or at least, it seemed to be. Until someone knocked on the door. A sharp, insistent knock. Not like someone asking permission, but like someone demanding entry. Josh and I exchanged a silent glance, an instant tension filling the air. I placed the cup in the sink and walked to the door. My heart was already racing, as if my body knew what my mind was still reluctant to accept. I opened the door. And there they were. My father, my mother, and Daniel. Standing on our porch like ghosts from a nightmare I thought I had left behind. Each of them holding a gift bag, wrapped in colorful paper and gold ribbons. A grotesque display of normalcy. Their smiles were stretched, artificial, so fake they hurt to look at. For a moment, I stood frozen. My father was the first to speak, his voice rough like gravel. "We came to pick up our grandchildren." His statement was so direct, so cold, that it took a second for me to fully comprehend what he was saying. My mother stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a fury disguised as concern. "They have the right to be with their real family, Myrtle." The real family. As if I were just an obstacle between them and what they considered their property. My blood ran cold in my veins. Behind me, I felt Josh step closer. He stood by my side, wordlessly, but holding my hand with a firmness that gave me all the strength I needed. My father continued, his voice heavy with threat. "If you don't cooperate, we'll go to a lawyer. We've looked into grandparent rights. We have legal backing." I took a deep breath, feeling every muscle in my body prepare for the battle I knew was coming. I looked into their eyes that, throughout my life, I had silently begged to look at me with love, not judgment. And in that moment, I finally saw the raw truth. They never really loved me. They loved control. They loved the feeling of power they had over me. And now, realizing they were losing, they were willing to use my own children as weapons. My stomach churned, but my voice came out steady, stronger than ever before. "If you try to take my children from me," I said, each word burning with fire, "I will show every message, every abuse, every humiliation, to any judge who wants to hear it. You have no power here. Not anymore. My father's face hardened, the mask of civility starting to crack. My mother, with theatrical tears running down her made-up face, tried to advance. Her voice choked. "You're destroying our family, Myrtle." Behind her, Daniel crossed his arms, his gaze full of disdain, as if he were watching a show where he already knew who the villain was. I felt a wave of something new inside me, something warm and liberating. Maybe it was courage. Maybe it was self-love, finally blossoming after years of darkness. I smiled. Not the weak, insecure smile I used to give to appease them, but a cold smile, sharp like the winter wind in Worcester. "The only thing I'm destroying," I said, my voice as clear as the church bell in the town center, "is this lie you call love." And without hesitation, I slammed the door in their faces. The snap of the wood closing echoed through the house like a gunshot. Behind me, I heard Josh release a sigh that seemed to carry years of accumulated tension. The kids came running, startled by the noise. I knelt to be at their level, wrapping them in a hug that promised, without words, "You're safe. I promise." Josh crouched beside me, his arm going around the three of us. There, on the floor of our living room, amidst crumpled gift wrap and half-eaten cookies, I knew. The war was over. I had chosen my side, and for the first time in my life, it was the right side. Mine. The minutes that followed were strangely silent, like the moment after a storm, when the world seems to hold its breath. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. I knew they might try other ways. Blackmail, lies, even more explicit threats. But for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt strength. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I ignored it. If it was time to start a new life, let it start now. And let it start without them. Josh, noticing the persistent vibration, smiled and said, "Let it ring, Myrtle. Today, no one is taking our peace." I smiled back. Yes. Today, no one would take our peace. While Emma and Benji laughed, competing to see who would eat more cookies, and Josh pulled me into a dance in the room lit only by the Christmas tree lights, I knew the worst was behind us. Through the window, the snow began to fall again, covering Worcester with a white, silent blanket. A new beginning, a new story. My story. It was the end, but also the beginning of the life I always deserved. In the days that followed the final confrontation, an unexpected silence fell over our lives. A silence so pure, so absolute, it felt unreal. No accusatory messages flashing on my phone screen. No cutting calls interrupting the peace of our home. No emotional blackmail echoing through my nights. It was as if the world had finally decided to give me a break. And in that vacuum of noise and pain, I heard something I had long forgotten. The steady beat of my own heart. I took a deep breath, standing on the porch of our home, the cold air filling my lungs like a promise. For the first time, the smell of snow mixed with the distant scent of burning wood didn't bring bitter memories. It brought hope. Inside, Josh was making hot chocolate, and the kids, Emma and Benji, were putting on their snow boots with the excitement typical of those who don't feel the cold when happiness warms their soul. "Mom, look!" Emma shouted, already running across the yard, her red coat flying behind her like a superhero cape. Benji followed closely behind, stumbling in his hurry, his laughter slicing through the cold air like music. I stood there, watching them roll in the soft snow, laughing as they made snow angels on the white ground, their little arms and legs flailing, drawing wings on the frozen surface. The scene looked like something out of a Christmas card, but for the first time, I knew it wasn't just a facade. It was real. It was ours. I felt tears streaming down my cold face, warming my skin in silent, hot trails. Josh approached, wrapping me in the warmth of his body and the comfort of his embrace. The cup of hot chocolate, forgotten in his free hand, released a thread of steam between us. I rested my head on his chest, feeling the constant beat of his heart, strong and secure. "Finally," I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Finally, we are a real family." He tightened his arms around me, needing no words to respond. We stood like that, motionless, watching the sunset turn the Worcester sky into a golden and reddish spectacle. The bare trees looked cut out against the horizon, burning in the twilight, and the snow beneath our feet reflected the light like crystals. It was as though the universe, in a rare moment of justice, was applauding our silent victory. Because, I knew now, family isn't who traps you in invisible chains, waiting for you to bleed to prove your love. Family is who sets you free. It's who accepts you, with all your imperfections. It's who holds your hand in difficult times without asking for anything in return. I, Myrtle Davy, for the first time in 40 years, was free. And it was strange. This freedom didn't come with fanfare or fireworks. It came softly, silently, like the first snow falling during the night, covering the world while everyone sleeps. That night, after putting Emma and Benji to bed, each in their blanket nests, their cheeks rosy from so much play, Josh and I sat by the lit fireplace. The flame danced, casting shadows on the walls. The comforting warmth seemed to seal the promise that the hard times were behind us. Josh handed me a small gift, awkwardly wrapped in blue paper. I furrowed my brow, surprised. "It's not your birthday," I said, smiling. He shrugged, shy. "Consider it a gift of liberation." I opened it carefully. Inside the little box was a simple necklace with a key-shaped pendant. A key. I stared at the object, tears returning to my eyes before I could stop them. Josh took my hand. "It's the key to your freedom, Myrtle, to our new life. Now you can open any doors you want, or lock away those that no longer deserve to reach you." I lowered my head, too emotional to speak. I knelt before him and hugged him tightly, feeling the key cold between us, like a silent symbol of all we had overcome. In the days that followed, life began to find a new rhythm. Emma and Benji seemed to blossom, free from the invisible tension I had unconsciously carried and passed on to them. They laughed more, played more, slept more soundly, and I too began to change. Little by little, I started painting again, something I hadn't done since my teenage years. I spent entire afternoons with brushes and paints, turning the white walls of the basement into an explosion of colors, each stroke a reminder that I no longer had to hide who I was. Josh set up a small studio for me, with easels and shelves full of paints and canvases. "So you never forget who you are," he said, kissing my forehead. The silence left by the absence of my parents and Daniel made room for something I had never fully experienced, my own voice. I laughed loudly. I cried without shame. I daydreamed. It was like learning to breathe again. But of course, not everything was easy. There were nights I woke up startled, expecting to hear my phone vibrate with new threats. There were moments when a shadow of guilt whispered that I was cruel for severing ties with those who had given me life. But in those moments, I reminded myself, true love doesn't demand payment. True love doesn't hurt, doesn't humiliate, doesn't imprison. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had freed myself from something that had never been love in the first place. In January, we received a Happy New Year card with no return address, left discreetly in our mailbox. Inside, a single sentence, written in my mother's familiar handwriting, "There's still time to come home." Josh and I exchanged a silent glance. He ripped the card in half without saying a word. And for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt only peace. Now, as the snow melts and spring approaches, I know that this is the season of my life when everything begins anew. Worcester may be small, cold, and full of old memories, but I am new. My children are growing up in a home where love is synonymous with freedom, not fear. Josh and I are planning to travel during the next holiday, maybe to the south, where the sun warms not only the skin, but also all the scars that winter left behind. And every new day is a quiet reminder that I chose something precious. I chose myself. And although the past sometimes knocks on the door, now I know some doors deserve to stay locked forever.